Madam Speaker, or rather, former Madam Speaker, I must apologize. But could you please state the year you first assumed the role of Speaker of the House? The voice was deliberate and soft, possessing that distinct Louisiana cadence that made every sentence feel like a conversation on a front porch rather than an interrogation within a Senate hearing room. Senator John Kennedy reclined in his chair, his reading spectacles balanced on the tip of his nose, gazing over them at Nancy Pelosi like a patient grandfather waiting for a grandchild to recall a trivial fact. Silence filled the room, but it was not the quiet of someone carefully formulating a response, nor the pause of someone weighing political risks. It was a vacant silence, the quiet desperation of searching for a memory that should be easily accessible, but remains firmly out of reach. Nancy Pelosi sat at the witness table in the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room, positioned between two attorneys wearing high-priced suits. She stared back at Senator Kennedy as if he had just requested she perform complex calculus mentally. Her mouth parted slightly, shut, and then opened once more. The C-SPAN lenses were zoomed tight on her expression. Every cable news station had cut away to broadcast this live. An oversight hearing concerning congressional stock trading and ethical breaches had initially seemed like typical Washington performance art when first scheduled. However, something about Pelosi's current appearance, the emptiness in her gaze and the faint confusion furrowing her brow, signaled to every viewer that this event would unfold differently. 10 seconds ticked by, then 15. The silence grew heavy and awkward. That was when we reclaimed the House from the Republicans after, she stammered, grasping like someone trying to recall a password typed thousands of times. Suddenly, when it mattered most, the information simply vanished. Kennedy's tone remained soft, bordering on benevolent. 2007, ma'am, you ascended to Speaker in January of 2007, which was 17 years ago. Do you recall that? Pelosi's complexion reddened ever so slightly. Certainly, I recall. I was merely thinking. In what year did you become Speaker for the second term? Another pause ensued, this one stretching longer than the last. Her attorneys adjusted their posture uneasily in their chairs. One leaned in to whisper a prompt, but Kennedy raised a hand to stop him. I would prefer Mrs. Pelosi answer from her own recollection, if you please. The lawyer retreated, and Pelosi gazed down at the surface before her. 2019. I believe it was 2019. Yes, ma'am, 2019. And you served until January of this current year, correct? When the new Congress convened? Yes. So you held the speakership twice for roughly 12 years total, occupying one of the most potent roles in American governance, third in succession for the presidency. You possessed access to confidential intelligence briefings, you voted on declarations of war, and you controlled which bills reached the floor. Do you remember that time? Well, certainly I do. Kennedy selected a document from the pile arranged before him. Good. Then you will surely recall the stock transactions, so let me inquire about those. He fixed his glasses and glanced down at the paper. March 15, 2020, which was a Sunday right in the midst of the initial COVID hysteria. Do you recall that day? Silence followed. Ma'am, do you hold a memory of March 15, 2020? Pelosi spoke in a hushed tone. I remember. That was during COVID. Yes, on that specific day, you and your husband Paul acquired $5 million in call options for Pfizer's stock. These were call options that would yield profit if Pfizer's share value rose. Do you recall that transaction? More silence filled the air. Mrs. Pelosi, do you remember buying $5 million worth of Pfizer options? My husband manages our portfolio. I do not involve myself in daily operations. But you signed the financial disclosure document. Kennedy displayed a piece of paper. This is your autograph, is it not? Right here at the bottom. He held it aloft so the cameras could capture it. Her signature was distinct on the projection screen positioned behind her. Pelosi gazed at it. There was absolutely no flicker of recognition in her eyes. She examined her own handwriting as if it belonged to a complete stranger. Do you remember signing this form, ma'am? I signed numerous documents. This specific one disclosed a $5 million transaction executed the day before the House voted on the CARES Act. That was the first significant COVID relief package, totaling $2 trillion. You were the speaker. You directed the negotiations. And the day prior to the vote, your family invested $5 million in a pharmaceutical firm poised to benefit massively from pandemic response appropriations. You do not remember that? She did not reply. Kennedy leaned forward a fraction. His voice remained soft, keeping that gentle cadence, yet there was a new element present now. It was concern. Genuine concern. Mrs. Pelosi, do you know what day it is today? She looked up at him, then toward her attorneys, then back to Kennedy. Everyone watching, the senators, the aides, and millions of television viewers witnessed the same expression. She did not know. She honestly did not know what day it was. Her attorney leaned in and whispered into her ear. She nodded faintly. Thursday, she stated. Your lawyer just informed you of that, Kennedy said quietly. Did you know it was Thursday before he told you? A long, terrible silence stretched out. What is the date, ma'am? Another pause occurred. She appeared lost. January 22nd, her lawyer whispered. January 22nd, Pelosi repeated. Kennedy reclined in his seat. He looked sorrowful. Mrs. Pelosi, I must ask, are you currently under a physician's care for memory issues? That was the moment everyone watching comprehended what this hearing was truly regarding. It was not merely about stock transactions. It was about whether Nancy Pelosi, one of the most potent politicians in American history, had been making decisions impacting hundreds of millions of people while her memory was actively failing. The silence following that question lasted 20 seconds. It felt like 20 years. She did not answer because she could not answer. In that moment, 50 years of political dominance ended, not with a corruption scandal or a vote, but with a simple query about the day of the week. 4 hours earlier, the scene had been vastly different. It was Thursday morning, January 22nd, 2026. The Senate Hart Office Building, Room 216. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room was filling with journalists, staff, and cameras. The formal ambiance of dark wood paneling and brass fixtures lent a weight of seriousness to the proceedings. This was the place where careers came to expire, where scandals were laid bare, and where history was written. The hearing had been convened after a ProPublica investigation 3 weeks prior revealed a pattern of stock trading by Congress members that appeared impossibly well-timed. The headline had been damning: Congress's inside traders, how lawmakers earned millions from information inaccessible to the public. Nancy Pelosi's trades had been highlighted prominently. Charts displayed her husband's purchases and sales aligned against major legislation and classified briefings. The pattern was impossible to overlook. They bought pharmaceutical stocks right before pandemic funding, tech stocks right before bills favoring tech companies, and sold defense stocks just before negative news regarding military contracts. Over and over again, the total profit during her speakership was $140 million on a congressional salary of $223,500 per year. The Senate Judiciary Committee had voted to hold hearings and subpoenaed Nancy Pelosi to testify under oath. She was no longer Speaker, as Republicans had taken the House in the 2024 elections, but she remained a sitting member of Congress and had no choice but to appear. At 9:45 a.m., she arrived. Nancy Pelosi was 85 years old, though she would never admit it. She had been in Congress for 38 years. She had been Speaker of the House twice for a total of 12 years. She had stared down presidents, survived scandal after scandal, and wielded power with an iron fist wrapped in designer suits and expensive jewelry. She entered the hearing room flanked by her lawyers, two from a prestigious D.C. firm, both carrying leather briefcases that likely cost more than most Americans earned in a month. Her chief of staff walked behind them, along with two communications staffers whose job was to spin whatever occurred today into something survivable. Pelosi wore a purple suit that was perfectly tailored. Her signature oversized sunglasses came off as she walked through the door, revealing a face that had seen more cosmetic procedures than most Beverly Hills residents. Her hair was styled with extreme precision. Her jewelry, a pearl necklace and diamond earrings, probably cost 6 figures. She looked imperious and untouchable, like she had done this 1,000 times before and would do it 1,000 times again. What she did not look was worried. That was her first mistake. She took her seat at the witness table while her lawyers sat on either side. They arranged papers, whispered to each other, and projected confidence. This was just another hearing to them. Answer vaguely, run out the clock, go back to the office, and fundraise off the Republican attacks. What Nancy Pelosi did not know, and what her lawyers did not know, was that John Kennedy had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment. It was not just regarding the stock trades, though those were damning enough, but on something else entirely. 3 weeks earlier, in Kennedy's office in the Russell Senate Office Building, his chief of staff had walked in with a thick folder. "Sir, you asked me to pull everything on Pelosi's public appearances for the past 3 years." John Kennedy looked up from the budget document he had been reading. He was 73 years old, but he looked younger, fit, and sharp. The folksy Louisiana drawl and the humble demeanor made people underestimate him constantly. He preferred it that way. His resume told a different story. Vanderbilt undergrad, University of Virginia law degree, then Oxford on a scholarship. He clerked for a federal judge, practiced law for 2 decades, served as state treasurer for 8 years, and then entered the Senate. He was not what he seemed, and he never had been. "What did you find?" Kennedy asked. His chief of staff dropped the folder on the desk. It was 3 inches thick, containing video transcripts and interview clips. "I flagged the concerning parts." Kennedy opened it and started reading. Within 5 minutes, he was taking notes. In an interview from June 2024 on MSNBC, Pelosi referred to President Trump as President Bush 3 times before her staff corrected her. During a speech at a fundraiser in August 2024, she repeated the exact same sentence 4 times in 90 seconds, word for word, like a skipping record. In a press conference in September 2024, she confused the name of her own committee assignment, calling the Appropriations Committee the Apportionments Committee. In a deposition for a civil case in December 2024, the transcript showed her answering "I don't recall" or "I don't remember" 76 times in 4 hours. Kennedy looked up. "This is more than just old age." His chief of staff nodded. "The pattern is getting worse. Compare early 2023 to late 2024. It is accelerating." "Has anyone raised this publicly?" "Not really, just some Twitter speculation, but mainstream media won't touch it." "She is still too powerful and too connected." Kennedy leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "Pull her financial disclosures, all of them. Every stock trade her husband made while she was Speaker. I want dates, amounts, and I want to cross-reference them with classified briefings and committee votes." You think the stock trading is connected to the cognitive issues? I think if she cannot remember what year she became speaker, she cannot remember signing off on $5 million trades. That means someone else was making those decisions using her access while she was too impaired to notice or care. His chief of staff whistled low. That is a serious allegation. It is not an allegation. It is a question. And I am going to ask it in public on live television. And we are going to watch her try to answer. They spent 2 weeks building the case. It was not a legal case, as Kennedy was not a prosecutor anymore. It was a narrative case, a pattern. Stock trade after stock trade was perfectly timed to classified information, followed by public statements that contradicted each other, followed by depositions where she could not remember anything, followed by interviews where she seemed confused about basic facts. By the time they were done, Kennedy had a binder of 30 pages, with everything documented, sourced, and on public record. He was not going to ambush her with secret information. He was going to ask her to remember things she should know, and he was going to watch her fail. Now, at 10:00 a.m. on January 22nd, the hearing was called to order. The chairman brought the room to silence. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on congressional stock trading and potential ethics violations will now come to order. He read through the formalities, the purpose of the hearing, the rules, and the witness list. Nancy Pelosi was the star attraction, but there would be others later, including former SEC officials, ethics experts, and law professors. Everyone, however, was here for her. The chairman recognized the ranking member for an opening statement, a Democrat from California. Naturally, he spent 5 minutes defending Pelosi, calling the hearing a partisan witch hunt and saying the stock trades were fully legal and disclosed as required. Then, a Republican senator gave a statement attacking her. The American people are tired of watching their representatives get rich off insider information while working families struggle. It was standard partisan theater. Democrats defending, Republicans attacking, and nobody's mind would change. Then it was Kennedy's turn. He stood up slowly and shuffled some papers. The shuffling was intentional, making him seem disorganized and harmless. People always underestimated the slow-talking Southern lawyer until it was too late. Mr. Chairman, I don't have a long speech prepared. I just want to ask the witness some questions and get some facts on the record. He turned to look at Pelosi. She looked back at him with that expression she had perfected over decades, slightly condescending, like he was wasting her time, but she was too polite to say so. Kennedy smiled slightly. Madam Speaker, oh, I apologize. You are not Speaker anymore, are you? What should I call you? Pelosi's voice was clipped. Congresswoman is fine. Thank you, Congresswoman. I appreciate your time today. He sat down, arranged his papers carefully, and took a sip of water. The slowness was calculated to build tension and make people wait. Now, I want to ask you about some stock trades, but first, just so we have a clear timeline for the record, can you tell me when you first became a member of Congress? It was a simple question, a basic fact that should be automatic. 1987, Pelosi said. I was first elected in 1987. Thank you. And when did you become Speaker of the House? That is where it started. That simple question. What year did you become Speaker? Pelosi paused. It was not a long pause, maybe 2 seconds, but it was 2 seconds too long for a question with an automatic answer. That was when we took back the House from the Republicans, after the Bush years, she said, searching. Everyone could see it. Her eyes had that distant look of someone trying to remember something just out of reach. Kennedy waited, did not help, did not interrupt. He just waited. 2007, she finally said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. Yes, ma'am, Kennedy said gently. January 2007. And you served as Speaker until 2011, when Republicans took the majority in the Tea Party wave. Then you were Minority Leader for 8 years. Then you became Speaker again in 2019 after Democrats took back the House. Is that timeline correct? Yes. So you were Speaker for 4 years, then Minority Leader for 8 years, then Speaker again for 6 years until this January. That is about 18 years in leadership, 12 as Speaker. You were one of the most powerful people in government, had access to classified briefings, controlled the legislative agenda, and were third in line for the presidency. Do you remember that time clearly? Of course I do. Good. Kennedy picked up a document. Then let us talk about some decisions you made during that time. Kennedy adjusted his reading glasses. Mrs. Pelosi, I want to establish that your memory of your time in leadership is clear and accurate. So I am going to ask you some basic questions, just facts, dates, and names, things any speaker would remember. Is that all right? Pelosi nodded. Fine. Who was president when you first became Speaker in 2007? George W. Bush. Correct. And who was Vice President? A slight pause. Cheney, Dick Cheney. Yes, ma'am. Now, when you became Speaker the second time in 2019, who was President? Donald Trump. And Vice President? Longer pause this time. Pence, Mike Pence. Correct. Now, who is the current President of the United States? This should be instant. Everyone in America knew this. Trump had been inaugurated 2 days ago. It had been wall-to-wall coverage. Pelosi opened her mouth. President Biden is… No, wait. She caught herself. Trump? President Trump was just inaugurated. That is correct. But you started to say Biden. President Biden served from 2021 to 2025, 4 years, 1 term. Then Trump won the election and was inaugurated Monday. You seem uncertain about that. Wes, I misspoke. It has been a transition period. Ma'am, it has been 2 days since the inauguration, and you initially said Biden was president. That concerns me. If you are unclear on who the current president is, I have to question whether your memory of events from 2020 to 2022 is reliable. One of the Democratic senators jumped in. Mr. Chairman, this is absurd. Everyone misspeaks. Kennedy turned to him. Senator, with respect, this isn't a casual conversation. Mrs. Pelosi is under oath testifying about financial decisions she made while Speaker. If she cannot clearly remember who was president 2 days ago versus 2 years ago, how can we trust her memory of specific stock trades and classified briefings? He turned back to Pelosi. Let me ask you this. Who is the current Senate Majority Leader? Silence. Pelosi's face showed confusion. Ma'am, who leads the Senate right now? Schumer. No, is it McConnell? She looked genuinely uncertain. I don't… It is Chuck Schumer, and has been since 2021. That is 4 years. You have worked with him on major legislation. You do not remember that? I know it is Schumer, You guessed McConnell first. Mitch McConnell has not been Majority Leader in 4 years. Why would you think it was him? She had no answer. Kennedy let the silence hang. Then, Mrs. Pelosi, are you feeling all right? Do you need to take a break? I am fine. Then let us continue. Kennedy pulled out a thick document. These are your financial disclosure forms from 2019 to 2024. 6 years of required reporting. I want to ask you about specific trades. He flipped to a flagged page. March 15th, 2020. Do you remember that date? I don't recall specific dates without… Let me help you. March 15th, 2020 was a Sunday. The COVID pandemic had just been declared a national emergency. The country was shutting down. The stock market had crashed. People were panicking. Do you remember that time period? Of course, COVID was. On that Sunday, March 15th, you and your husband purchased $5 million in call options for Pfizer stock. Do you remember that trade? Silence filled the room. Mrs. Pelosi? My husband manages our investments. I'm not involved in the day-to-day. But you signed the disclosure form. By law, you have to disclose any trade over $1,000 within 45 days. This was $5 million. Your signature is on the form. He held it up. The cameras zoomed in. Her signature was clearly visible. Do you remember signing this? She stared at it. There was no recognition in her eyes. It was like looking at a stranger's signature. I sign a lot of documents. This one disclosed a $5 million trade, the largest single trade you made all year. And you don't remember signing it? I trust my staff to prepare accurate disclosures. So your staff knew about the trade, prepared the form, and you signed it without reviewing it? I review everything, but I don't memorize. Then you remember the trade, yes or no? Pause. I remember my husband makes investments. That's not what I asked. Do you remember this specific trade? $5 million in Pfizer call options on March 15th, 2020. Longer pause. I don't recall the specific details. Kennedy leaned forward. Here is why that is a problem. The next day, Monday, March 16th, the House voted on the CARES Act, the first major COVID relief bill. $2 trillion. It included $10 billion specifically for vaccine development. You were Speaker. You led the negotiations. You knew what was in the bill. And the day before the vote, your family bet $5 million that Pfizer, a vaccine manufacturer, would see its stock price increase. He paused. That is either the luckiest coincidence in investment history, or it is insider trading. But you don't remember it. Which raises the question, if you don't remember a $5 million trade made the day before a major vote, what else don't you remember? Pelosi's lawyers were whispering to each other frantically. One leaned over to her, but Kennedy held up a hand. Let her answer, please. The lawyer sat back. Pelosi looked at Kennedy. The trade was based on publicly available information. My husband's investment advisors, but you don't remember it. You can't tell me why March 15th. You can't tell me why Pfizer specifically. You can't tell me why $5 million. You just know it happened because your lawyer showed you the disclosure form. He pulled out another document. Let's try another one. June 18th, 2021. Do you remember that date? No. On June 18th, 2021, your husband purchased $2.5 million in Microsoft stock. 5 days later, June 23rd, the House passed a bill authorizing $52 billion for semiconductor manufacturing in the United States. Microsoft stood to benefit enormously from that bill. Do you remember that trade? I don't remember every... How about this one? Kennedy was relentless. Now, December 3rd, 2021, your husband bought $3 million in Tesla call options. 2 weeks later, the House passed an expanded electric vehicle tax credit that added $7,500 to the purchase price of a Tesla, making Teslas more affordable, driving demand, increasing the stock price. Ring any bells? Pelosi's face was flushed. Senator, I don't coordinate my legislative work with my husband's investments. I'm not asking if you coordinate. I'm asking if you remember. These are multi-million-dollar trades happening right before major votes. Trades that made your family enormous profits. And you're telling me you don't remember any of them? My husband handles the investments. But you signed the disclosures. Your name is on these forms. Kennedy held up a stack of them. Dozens of trades, tens of millions of dollars, all perfectly timed. And you claim you don't remember any of it. Kennedy pulled out his phone. Let's talk about some statements you've made recently. Last month, January 4th, you did an interview with CNN about this stock trading controversy. Do you remember that interview? I do many interviews. This was 3 weeks ago with Jake Tapper. You were asked directly about the stock trades. Let me show you what you said. He tapped his phone. A video played on the screen behind Pelosi. Her own voice filled the room. I have never, ever used my position to benefit financially. My husband makes his own investment decisions, and I'm proud of his success. Kennedy paused the video. Do you stand by that statement? Yes. Okay. Now, 3 days later, January 7th, you did an interview with MSNBC. Nicole Wallace asked you about the same topic. Let me show you that one. Another video clip. Look, maybe some of the trades look bad in hindsight. Maybe we should have been more careful about timing, but there was no intentional coordination between my office and my husband's investments. Kennedy paused it. Do you see the problem? Pelosi looked confused. I don't. On January 4th, you said you never used your position to benefit financially. 3 days later, you said maybe you should have been more careful about timing. Those are contradictory statements. Either you did something wrong and should have been more careful, or you did nothing wrong at all. Which is it? Those statements aren't contradictory. I was saying, ma'am, they are 3 days apart. You gave 2 different answers to the same question in the same week. Pelosi opened her mouth, then closed it. I was trying to explain the nuance. Let me show you more. Kennedy pulled out printed transcripts. January 10th, you told a reporter from Fox News, quote, I don't recall the specific trades my husband made. That is a direct quote. Do you remember saying that? If that is what the transcript says. But then, on January 12th, you told Politico, quote, those trades were made on sound financial advice from experienced professionals. So which is it? You don't recall the trades, or you know they were based on sound advice? Silence. How can you defend trades as being based on sound advice if you don't recall the trades themselves? No answer. Kennedy leaned back. Mrs. Pelosi, in the past month alone, you have given contradictory statements about the same topic to different media outlets. You can't keep your story straight from one interview to the next. Combined with your inability to remember basic facts, like who the current Senate Majority Leader is, I am genuinely concerned about your memory. Kennedy pulled out a bound document. It was thick, maybe 200 pages. Mrs. Pelosi, 3 weeks ago, you were deposed as part of a civil lawsuit related to these stock trades. A shareholder lawsuit against some of the companies involved. You were deposed under oath for 4 hours. Do you remember that deposition? Yes? Good. Do you remember how many times you answered I don't recall or I don't remember during that deposition? Silence. You don't remember how many times you said you don't remember? Kennedy let the irony hang. Let me tell you. 76 times in 4 hours you claimed you didn't remember something. 76 times. He opened the transcript. Let me read you some of the questions you couldn't remember the answers to. Page 23. Do you remember discussing the CARES Act with your husband in March 2020? Your answer, I don't recall. He flipped pages. Page 47. Do you remember when you first learned about your husband's purchase of Pfizer options? Your answer, I don't recall. More pages. Page 68. Do you remember signing the financial disclosure form for the Microsoft purchase? Your answer, I don't recall. Page 91. Do you remember attending a classified briefing on semiconductor supply chains before the CHIPS Act vote? Your answer, I don't recall. Kennedy looked up. Mrs. Pelosi, these aren't trivial questions. These are major events. Classified briefings that only a handful of people in the country have access to. Multi-million-dollar trades, signature legislation, and you don't remember any of it. Her lawyer jumped in. Senator, depositions are adversarial proceedings. Lawyers advise witnesses to be careful with their answers. I understand how depositions work, Counselor. I've taken hundreds of them. But there's a difference between being careful and having no memory. And here is the real problem. Kennedy flipped to another section. On page 47 of this deposition, you were asked, do you discuss investment strategies with your husband? Your answer was, no, my husband handles all of our investments independently. He flipped forward. But on page 103 you were asked, did you ever talk with your husband about market trends or economic conditions? And you answered, occasionally we discuss general economic trends like any married couple might. He looked up. So, which is it? You don't discuss investments with him at all, or you occasionally discuss economic trends, because economic trends inform investment strategies? Those answers contradict each other, and they are from the same deposition 50 pages apart. Pelosi looked flustered. I was trying to distinguish between specific trades and general conversations. But you can't remember either. You said, I don't recall 76 times. You can't remember the conversations, but you also can't consistently describe whether the conversations happened at all. Kennedy's voice softened. It was almost kind now, which somehow made it worse. Mrs. Pelosi, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you deserve directness, and the American people deserve the truth. In the past month, you have given contradictory public statements. You have been unable to remember basic facts about current events. In your deposition, you claimed not to remember anything 76 times. Today, you have struggled to remember what year you became Speaker, who the current Senate Majority Leader is, and whether you remember multi-million-dollar stock trades made by your family. He paused. I am concerned about your memory. I am concerned about your cognitive function, and I need to ask, have you been evaluated by a doctor for any kind of cognitive impairment or memory disorder? Her lawyer immediately objected. Senator, that is a medical question that is inappropriate for this forum. It is directly relevant, Kennedy said, his voice still quiet but firm. If Mrs. Pelosi was making legislative decisions while experiencing cognitive decline, the American people have a right to know. If she was signing off on stock trades worth millions of dollars without full awareness or memory of what she was signing, that is relevant to whether those trades were made with her knowledge and consent. He turned back to Pelosi. Ma'am, I am not trying to embarrass you. I am trying to understand how these trades happened, because here is what I see. Either you made these trades knowingly, which means you used your position for personal gain, or you didn't make them knowingly because you weren't cognitively capable of understanding what you were signing. Either way, you shouldn't have been in leadership. The room was completely silent. So I'll ask again, have you been evaluated for cognitive impairment? Pelosi's hands were shaking slightly. I am completely competent. Then answer my questions. What was the date of the Pfizer trade? Silence. What year did you become Speaker the first time? She was searching again. Couldn't find it. What did you have for breakfast this morning? Long pause. She genuinely could not remember. "What day of the week is it?" her lawyer whispered. "Thursday." "Thursday," she repeated. "Your lawyer just told you that." "Did you know it before he told you?" No answer. "Mrs. Pelosi, what is today's date?" She looked panicked now, lost. Her lawyer whispered again. "January 22nd. "January 22nd, she said. Kennedy sat back. He looked genuinely sad. "Mr. Chairman, I move that we request a formal cognitive evaluation of the witness before proceeding further with this investigation." The Democratic senators erupted. "This is outrageous. You are attacking a woman based on her age. This is sexist ageism." But Kennedy was not backing down. "Mr. Chairman, this woman had access to our nation's most sensitive intelligence for 12 years. She voted on authorizations for military force. She controlled trillion-dollar budgets. She was third in line for the presidency. And she is sitting here today unable to remember basic facts about her own career, unable to tell us what day it is, without her lawyer whispering it to her. If there is cognitive impairment, and I believe the evidence shows there is, the American people have a right to know." A Republican senator piled on. "The trades speak for themselves. $140 million in gains over 12 years. Perfect timing again and again and again. Either she is lying about not remembering, or she is genuinely impaired. Either way, she had no business being Speaker." Another Republican spoke. "If she was cognitively impaired while making these trades, that means someone else was using her position and access for financial gain. That is fraud. That is corruption. That is potentially criminal." The chairman tried to restore order. "Gentlemen, please." "Mr. Chairman," Kennedy said, "I am not attacking Mrs. Pelosi. I am trying to get to the truth. And the truth is that she cannot answer basic questions. She cannot remember her own statements from 3 weeks ago. She cannot tell us what day it is without help. That is not partisan. That is observable fact." He turned back to Pelosi. "Ma'am, I am going to ask you one more time, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you remember making these stock trades?" Long silence. She was staring at the table. "Do you remember the classified briefings that preceded these trades?" Her hands were shaking visibly now. "Do you know where you are right now?" She looked up at him, and in her eyes, for just a moment, there was clarity. A flash of the woman who dominated Congress for decades. And in that flash she knew. She knew what he was doing. She knew it was over. But then the blankness returned. The confusion. The searching. "I'm in. This is the Senate." "It's a Senate hearing room." "Yes." "Do you know why you are here?" "Stock trading," she said quietly. "Do you remember the trades?" Silence. Her chief of staff rushed forward from the audience seating, leaned down to whisper urgently in her ear. The camera caught it all. The panic in his face, the confusion in hers. Pelosi stood suddenly. "I don't have to sit here and be attacked with conspiracy theories. Ma'am, these aren't conspiracy theories. These are your financial disclosures, your deposition transcript, your public statements, all public record, all documented. I am just asking you to remember them. I am done with this hearing." She was gathering her things. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped her phone. One of her lawyers picked it up. The chairman stood. "Mrs. Pelosi, you are still under subpoena. You cannot just leave." But she was already moving. Her lawyers had to support her by the elbows. She looked unsteady, confused. like she wasn't quite sure where she was going. Kennedy called after her, his voice still that calm Louisiana drawl. "Mrs. Pelosi, if you leave, we will have no choice but to refer this matter to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation into the trades, and to refer the question of your cognitive capacity to the House Ethics Committee." She stopped at the door. She turned for a moment. The old Nancy Pelosi was there, imperious, defiant, powerful. "Do what you have to do, Senator." And she left. The door closed behind her. The cameras caught it all. The confused look on her face, the way her staff had to guide her, the lawyer carrying her briefcase, the chief of staff on his phone, probably calling the communications team to start damage control. The hearing room erupted. Senators shouting, reporters yelling questions, camera flashes going off. Kennedy sat calmly organizing his papers into neat stacks. The footage was everywhere within minutes. Every cable network, every news website, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Not the full 4-hour hearing, but clips, the devastating clips. "What year did you become Speaker?" Followed by a long, confused pause. "Who is the Senate Majority Leader?" Followed by Schumer, "No McConnell." "What is today's date?" And the lawyer has to whisper the answer. "Do you remember these trades?" Met with a blank stare and no answer. The most viral clip was 23 seconds long. Kennedy asking gently, "Mrs. Pelosi, what day of the week is it?" Her looking lost. Her lawyer whispering, "Thursday," and her repeating, "Thursday," like a child reciting a lesson. That clip got 40 million views in 6 hours. Medical experts were on cable news within an hour. Neurologists, geriatric specialists, cognitive experts. Those are classic signs of significant cognitive impairment. The blank stares, the inability to retrieve basic information, the contradictory statements, very concerning. The fact that she needed prompting for the day of the week suggests more than just normal aging. Even Democrats started hedging, not defending her exactly, but not attacking Kennedy either. If there are health concerns, obviously Mrs. Pelosi should prioritize her well-being. The stock trading allegations are separate from any cognitive issues, but both deserve investigation. We should all be careful about making medical diagnoses, but the questions raised today are legitimate. By Friday morning, Pelosi's office released a statement, brief and carefully worded. Congresswoman Pelosi is taking a temporary leave from her congressional duties to undergo a comprehensive medical evaluation. She remains committed to serving her constituents and looks forward to returning to work soon. Translation: They knew it was over. Monday, the Justice Department announced a formal investigation into the stock trades. Not because of the hearing itself, but because now there was evidence she might not have been mentally competent when she authorized or signed off on the trades. If she wasn't competent, someone else was making decisions using her position and access. That was fraud. That was corruption. Paul Pelosi, her husband, was subpoenaed to testify. His lawyer announced he would invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. That was answer enough. Wednesday, 3 House Democrats who had been Pelosi's closest allies for decades called for her resignation. Not because of the corruption, but because of her health. "We love Nancy. She is a giant in American politics, a trailblazer. But if she is experiencing cognitive difficulties, she needs to focus on her health, not representing constituents. The kindest thing we can do is encourage her to step back." The polls came Friday. Devastating. 71% of voters believed Pelosi should resign, including 54% of Democrats. 63% believed she had engaged in insider trading. 58% believed her cognitive decline meant she never should have been Speaker during her second term from 2019 to 2023. But the killer question was this: do you believe Nancy Pelosi knowingly made the stock trades in question? Yes, 44%. No, 37%. Unsure, 19%. That unsure was the problem because combined with no, it meant 56% of people thought she either didn't make the trades knowingly or they weren't sure if she had. Either she was corrupt or she was impaired. Either way, unfit. 10 days after the hearing, Nancy Pelosi announced her resignation from Congress, not just from leadership, but from her seat. The statement was released on a Friday afternoon. The classic news dump timing. She didn't appear on camera. No press conference, just a written statement. After 38 years of service in the House of Representatives, and after consultation with my family and my doctors, I have decided to retire from Congress to focus on my health. I am proud of my accomplishments, from the Affordable Care Act to marriage equality to the American Rescue Plan. I leave knowing that I fought for working families, for women, for justice. I thank the people of San Francisco for the honor of representing them. I look forward to spending time with my family and grandchildren. She didn't mention the stock trades, didn't mention the hearing, didn't mention Kennedy, didn't address any of it. Just a vague mention of health, a list of accomplishments, and a dignified exit. 3 months later, the Justice Department charged Paul Pelosi with securities fraud and insider trading. 27 counts, each one corresponding to a trade that had been made within days of Nancy receiving classified information or before a major vote. He pleaded guilty. Part of the plea deal was that Nancy would not be charged. The prosecutors decided she genuinely had not been aware of what she was signing, had not been competent to have criminal intent. That was almost worse than being charged. Too impaired to prosecute. Too far gone to be held responsible. Paul got 18 months in federal prison and a $10 million fine. He served 14 months at a minimum security facility in California. Nancy Pelosi disappeared from public life. No interviews, no statements. Her Twitter account went silent. Her last tweet was the resignation announcement. Occasionally, there were sightings. TMZ got photos of her being helped into a car outside a medical facility in San Francisco. She looked small, frail, confused. Nothing like the woman who had wielded a gavel and controlled the House of Representatives. John Kennedy gave one interview after her resignation to a reporter from the Baton Rouge Advocate, a local Louisiana paper, not national media. "Did you feel bad?" the reporter asked, "exposing her like that on national television?" Kennedy was quiet for a moment. "I felt bad for the country. We had someone in a position of immense power, third in line for the presidency, who couldn't remember what day of the week it was, who was signing documents she had no memory of signing, who was making decisions affecting hundreds of millions of people while her mind was failing." "But did you feel bad for her personally?" "Of course I did. I wouldn't wish cognitive decline on anyone. It is cruel. It robs you of yourself. But here is the thing. It is not her fault that her memory was failing. That is age. That is disease. That happens to people. What is someone's fault is the system that kept her in power even as everyone around her could see she was declining. Her staff knew, her colleagues knew, leadership knew, and they kept her there because she was useful, because she could raise money, because she was a symbol." He paused. "I didn't end Nancy Pelosi's career to be cruel. I did it because the American people deserve to know that the person making decisions on their behalf wasn't capable of remembering what those decisions were. That is not partisan. That is just accountability. The reporter asked one more question. Do you think the stock trades were corrupt? Kennedy smiled slightly. I think someone was making very profitable trades using information that only Nancy Pelosi and a handful of others had access to. Whether that someone was her husband, her staff, or Nancy herself before her decline accelerated, I don't know. The courts will sort that out. What I know is this. You can't serve in Congress if you can't remember what Congress is voting on. And for at least the last 2 years of her time as Speaker, Nancy Pelosi couldn't remember. Someone should have stopped it sooner. A year after her resignation, Nancy Pelosi was moved to a memory care facility in San Francisco. The family released a brief statement. Our mother is receiving excellent care and is comfortable. We ask for privacy during this difficult time. She was 86 years old. She had been in Congress for 38 years. She had been Speaker of the House for 12 years. She had been one of the most powerful women in American history. And in the end, it wasn't a political opponent who brought her down. It wasn't a scandal or an election loss or a revolt from her own caucus. It was a simple question from a soft-spoken senator with a Louisiana drawl. What day of the week is it? She couldn't answer, and that told everyone everything they needed to know. The lesson, if there was one, was this. Power doesn't care about your legacy. Power doesn't care about what you accomplished or who you helped or how many barriers you broke. Power demands competence. And the moment you can't provide that competence, power moves on. Nancy Pelosi's power had moved on, and she had been left behind, unable to even remember it was ever hers.